The Hawk That Dare Not Hunt by Day by Scott Odell, Chapter 29. By chance, I saw King Henry just 3 days later when we returned to London. We were waiting, our ship and his barge, to make the perilous trip between the arches of London Bridge, His Majesty on one side and we on the other. We were waiting for the tide to turn, so he could go downstream to Hampton Court and we to Customs. It had been a dreadful winter in London. Cold, mizzling days, the seas frozen, people eating flour made of beans, and even through the winter months, fear of the plague. In Antwerp, I had heard tales from captains traveling thither of 9 or 10 people dying each day. Now that it was early spring, the number had increased. It was a warm day with a breeze from far-off fields that smelled of newly cut hay. The breeze blew the royal banners straight out and made them snap like whips. I saw women in gay-colored dresses and courtiers with feathers in their hats. Now and then I caught a glimpse of the king himself pacing the deck with his long strides, his skin glowing pink beneath his white shirt, his broad shoulders, it was said they were 3 feet across, and his reddish hair giving him the look of a young athlete, impatient to grapple with some monstrous foe. How grand he looked! How much the conquering king! The tide ebbed, and the roar of the water rushing through the arches ceased. Now I could hear the sound of viols and lutes and other sweet instruments. We passed 2 starlings away, but I caught a close glimpse of the king, still striding the length of the deck, shining with good health and spirits. If he was afraid of the plague that now gripped the city, there was no sign of his fear. The only way I knew that there was some concern on the royal barge was that I saw, as we passed within hailing distance, 2 pots of flame on the deck, and caught the strong odor of burning ilex, whose fragrant smoke was thought to hold the plague at bay. But they spoke of the plague at Customs, and the first thing Belsey asked me was, "Did you see the king and his court fleeing down the river?" "Is that bad?" I said. "More than 3,000 dead of it last week. You didn't bring any with you." He was alarmed, so alarmed that it was a full minute before he thought to ask me how I had fared in Antwerp with the contraband corn and what kind of cargo I had brought in. Only when I informed him that we had tripled our money on the corn, that I had bought timber for a fine mainmast and olive oil at a price that assured us a handsome profit, only then did he manage a smile. We went promptly to the goldsmiths and settled our account for the corn, and with my share I left at once for Clink, hoping to free my Uncle Jack, if not, then to at least improve his living conditions. Samuel Carswell was present. I waited for the better part of 2 hours to see him, yet he greeted me with one of his fleshy grins and bade me to take a chair, where the sun was in my eyes and I had to squint to see him. He asked kindly about my voyage to Antwerp and about my profits therefrom, but he wasted no time getting down to the business at hand. "As I informed you before," he said, "I cannot free your uncle until certain formalities are met, and formalities take time, especially now when so many of our officials have left the city. However, I can move Master Barton from where he now resides to more comfortable quarters. There he'll enjoy the morning sun, quiet, and the company of more inspiring companions." "I'm a sailor," I reminded him, "with limited funds." "A captain and a ship owner," Mr. Carswell corrected me. "For the advantages outlined, I must have a stipend of £5 and £2 a week thereafter. And may I remind you," he said, rising to his feet, "that we have a waiting list for the commodious quarters that your uncle will occupy." There was nothing to do except to pay the fee he demanded and do so as pleasantly as possible. While I was closing the door, on my way out, and as he stuffed the gold coin in his doublet, a thought struck him. Your uncle, he said, has been feeling poorly the last few days, I am told. Mr. Snye has moved him to new quarters where he'll be more comfortable. Who is Mr. Snye? I demanded. One of the helpers, Mr. Carswell said. You might properly call her a nurse. Not a regular nurse, mind you. The regular nurses are all occupied with the sick. But a nurse she is, and you'll find her most accommodating. Where do I find Mistress Snye? He came around the desk, pressed past me, begging my pardon, and pointed down the corridor. There at the end is a turning. You take this turning to the left, then to the right. Here you'll come to a door, and beyond the door is a courtyard, and across the courtyard is where you'll find Mistress Snye. That is, you'll find her in the vicinity. On the way, I paid another stipend to the old woman who kept the ledger, and then another to the lean young man with the keys, who took me to the courtyard but would go no farther. That's where they keep the sick ones, he said, pointing, and quickly disappeared. Mr. Snye met me at the door and led me up a short flight of stairs to a large barren room with one window and thick straw on the floor. There were a dozen bodies or more lying about, some quite still, others groaning and grinding their teeth. I stopped and stared at the scene before me, speechless and numb, it slowly dawning upon me that the place where I stood was the plague room, the pest house for Clink Prison. Mistress Snye was a big woman, shaped like an ionic pillar. Who is it you want? She said. We're busy here. Speak up. Maybe he's not here. We sent out a load of them last night. Captain Jack Barton, I said. Mr. Snye knew everyone, no matter that they might have sunken cheeks and twisted mouths, that they crawled instead of walked, and even their loved ones wouldn't know them. She glanced around, knowing them all. Captain Barton? He didn't go out in the cart last night. No, they change fast. They come in looking fine, and in 3 hours, they're dead. No, he's here, over there in the corner. Yes, that's the captain, and a brave one he is, too. I knew Uncle Jack because of his beard and the fire in his eyes. Everything else was changed. He was shrunken and his chin drooped, and he was the color of wet ashes. He could have been someone else. He put out his hand, but changed his mind and withdrew it. I am sick, boy, sick as a cur, but I'll be out. Did you bring money to pay my way? We had a successful trip, I said, and as soon as you feel better, we'll have you on deck with all our sails set. He tried to turn over, but failed. Strong in the head, but weak in the body, he grunted. I must turn over, boy. I've got something here I need. Speaking of ships, just the thing. I rolled him over, and he scrabbed around until he found a piece of paper, which he handed to me. This is just in case, boy. I'm going to make it. When the wind blows, it's good to be ready with a reef, eh? It was a short sentence on a small piece of paper, written in a shaky hand, willing me, in the event of his death, all rights to the ship, the Black Pearl. He had had trouble signing his name, but it was there and under the signature of Sarah Nye. Written, dated, witnessed, and delivered, he said, all in proper order, eh? Trying to smile, I thanked him and put the paper away in my doublet. I could tell that he expected to be on his feet in a matter of days. Otherwise, he would never have made out the will and signed it. It's possible, however, that he was trying to avoid the jaws of hell, which vaguely loomed in his thoughts. Nurse Nye said that she thought he would die before the night was out. Around 3, she thought, since that was the hour that most of them did die. But Uncle Jack died at 4 o'clock instead of at 3, just as the death cart was passing, one man driving, another walking alongside, ringing his bell. The nurse hailed the driver, and when she began to drag Uncle Jack across the floor, I rushed in to lift him up. But she pushed me away and called to the man with the bell. The plague is contagious, she said. You catch it by touch, by a breath, by a look. I argued with her. I said that I would take my uncle down the river and bury him far out at sea. She gave me another push, shoving me away from him. God bless us, she cried. You're daft. The bell ringer and cart driver took a part, and the two of them dragged Uncle Jack, still clutching a handful of straw, across the floor and down the stairs, his head bumping with a hollow sound on each of the 3 steps. Together, they flung him into the death cart, already filled with helter-skelter piled-up bodies. The driver clucked to his horses. The bell ringer rang his bell, and off they went along the dimly lit street. End of chapter 29.